All right, good evening, everyone. We are live here at the Labster webinar. I'm so excited to be here tonight, or good morning if you're waking up in the US. We have a lot to cover here today. It's one of our first webinars here at Labster, and it's a part of a longer series of webinars that we're planning to create for you to help share a lot of the insights and learnings that we are creating here here at Labster, and that we want to share with the broader community. So welcome again on board. I'm excited to have you here, and a few logistical points just as we get started. First of all, I want to highlight that we have a chat feature so that we can engage with you. It's not only me who is here, also Shiego and Marian from our team is available to chat with you in the live chat. So please do check the chat. Now, if you do not see the chat, please check that you are at the YouTube live link and make sure that you're logged in with your Google account. That way you'll be able to participate in the chat. So if you're there in the chat, please share your country, where you're from, a little bit about yourself, just so we can engage with you. I think from the attendee list, we saw that we had a lot of people from all over the world. So that's super exciting to see. We'll of course also be sharing this webinar afterwards with the broader community. But if you're here live with us now, thank you very much. And this is your opportunity also to ask questions directly to us. So as I'm going to go through the presentation I'll share with you today, please ask the questions. Marian will take care and facilitate all of it. And then after the presentation, we'll dive into more details and dive into some of those questions. All right, very good, very good. Let me just make sure I covered all of it. Yes, very good. So the purpose of this webinar is really to share, first of all, the research that we're doing, some of the upcoming things that we're working on, but more importantly, also as a quick introduction to Labster, what we do and why you should consider using Labster to educate and teach your students. So what we'll be covering is a broad presentation and ask questions as we go through the presentation so that I can also do a deep dive on the things that you would like to hear more about. So let me start by sharing my screen. Here we go, and this is the presentation. So for those of you who are completely new to Labster, Labster is a virtual 3D laboratory simulator that creates an environment in which students can prepare themselves for the real laboratory exercises. So it's a really great way, just like a flight simulator that is training the students, that allows you to train your students before they go into the real physical laboratory. And in many ways, that can really help reduce costs of, and also increase the availability for the students, or their ability to test and try out different simulations multiple times before they go into the real laboratory. And we've done numerous studies and research to show and really scientifically not prove, but validate at least that there is a really high impact and high learning outcome from using these simulations. So briefly about us, Labster as a company and who we really are. Well, we're a lot of people now, more than 60 people. We are all driven really by the passion to empower the next generation of scientists to change the world. And we really mean that from the depth of our heart. We believe that the world and the future of this world is highly dependent on students all over the world right now going through their education in STEM. And we believe that by providing these students and teachers the best possible tools using the newest innovation and technologies to empower them is one of the best things that we can do really for the whole world. Of course, also for the students themselves, but really at the end goal, it's really to help us change the world and come up with new great innovations that can solve some of the global challenges that we're seeing. So one of the things that we find and through our own teaching, so many people in our team has been teaching and also been faced with many of the challenges today of teaching students. And often one of the main challenges we see is engagement. How do you keep students really engaged throughout full day lectures and many times these monologues that has to be provided to provide all the students with all this education and knowledge. And what we really dived into there was to look at how can we engage the students with fun, exciting, interesting simulations. So not only focusing on the learning outcomes, which we do, of course, everything is driven by the learning outcomes, but just as much looking at how can we bring meaning into these simulations? How can we bring meaning into the education such that the students throughout the entire simulations and the learning journey that they're going through are engaged and excited about the things that they're learning. And this is one of the many, many things that we believe really makes Labster an amazing tool to complement the existing teaching in your school. And I'll be covering, of course, a few more in this space. Now, we want to emphasize that education, you don't have to have advanced techniques and technology really to educate. A lot of it can be done with hands-on, but we still believe that technology plays an important role where it is possible to use to complement the education in many different ways. And it can be really, really effective. We've seen both in our own research, but also other companies in improving the pedagogy and allowing the teachers to complement their existing teachings using these virtual simulations. Here are just some quick examples where you could see different applications of it in medicine. And we, of course, are in Labster are very focused on biology, chemistry, physics, engineering, and also medical and many other fields increasingly. And we're now talking with more and more universities and high schools, colleges around the world to investigate where the biggest demands are and where we as a company can help you as a teacher or as a student to create better learning tools to complement the classroom. One of the things that also drives us a lot and what we see out there is this is a study that was published in Nature just less than 2 years ago that looked into the US dropout rates within STEM specifically. And what we saw is that there's nearly 60% of STEM students are either completely leaving their degree or switching to non-STEM fields of education. And we do believe that that's way too much, and too many to a large degree, parts of this is really because we're not able to fully engage the student in the and motivate them and engage them with the education. So what we also have set out to do is not only create highly effective learning tools or simulations, but really also try to engage the students in their studies and make sure that they're really excited about STEM and about learning new innovative technologies, and also understanding that everything that they're learning is so important and critical for not just for themselves, but for the entire world. So those are some of the parts that we're really investigating and working with several researchers and many different universities to further understand this and how we can continue to help universities and colleges and high schools to decrease the dropout rates from the students. And so let me explain maybe a little bit more about our approach and how we see that. So really, we have a very sort of a scientific approach to it. So we always look at what are the main learning outcomes that these universities are aiming to teach the students. And then we have a very close collaboration with the industry, the experts at both the universities, but also in the companies that are the experts within the fields. And then together we look at how we can create these learning simulations, the learning experiences that can best teach and prepare the students for instance, entering laboratories or learning about specific science concepts. We're also very much looking into integrating many different types of learning pedagogy and really experimenting in many ways with how we can build the best optimal learning simulations for the students. And so again, I want to emphasize that Labster is closely collaborating with the top universities and schools around the world to make sure that also the quality of everything we build is really of the best possible. So everything you see is validated by top researchers from around the world. And I mentioned actually this already a little bit earlier, but really the word proven is always dangerous to use, but it has been shown over and over again that, for instance, flight simulators are much more effective at teaching pilots than actual in-flight training. And the reason for this is really because simulations allow you as a teacher to let the students go through the same specific parts of a learning simulation multiple times until they really master that specific concept. So one example could be a pilot being very good at taking off with an airplane, but needing to rehearse maybe landing under harsh wind conditions, and they can then very quickly practice the same landing every 5 minutes or so throughout these learning simulations until they fully master that. And we are basically taking that same concept into these virtual simulations where students can, in many cases, perform very complex simulations very easily, but also with very little time usage. So in many cases, you'll see, for instance, let's take a fermentation simulations, which I'll show you also in a few minutes. Those tests or experiments can often take several days or weeks, and with the virtual simulations, you can get instant feedback in just a few seconds, because our simulations are using mathematical simulations to simulate what's happening in the real physical world, to such a close degree that it gives the students a full understanding of how the different changes they might introduce into the laboratories might affect the outcome and the results. And it's also an important part to mention that the virtual simulations that we built are allow the students to experiment and test and try different experiments until they get the best or optimal outcome. So for instance, with fermentation, there are many different parameters you may want to adjust and experiment with. And we allow the students to do that so they can really get different results depending on how they set up the experiments, and then make their own conclusions towards the end. This is also just an overview of some of the many amazing universities and companies from around the world that we've had the fortune to work closely together with, and we're incredibly grateful for all the professors and teachers, educators, and even students from around the world who have helped us build these many high quality learning simulations. One specific example I'd like to highlight is we last year did an exciting study where we worked together with students at universities to have the students help design a laboratory. So the students would basically help us as a company design these laboratories, and then together with the students and teachers, we would put together a specific learning simulation in collaboration with them. And we're very grateful that we actually won the Reimagine, the QS Wharton Reimagine Education Award just last December, a few months ago, for this exciting project that we're doing, and we'll be sharing a lot more about that here in the coming months. And Marian actually wrote an exciting also blog post about that. So if you're curious to know more about that, please do check out our blog, where we have also many other exciting updates on this. If you're representing a university or school, high school, college, please do reach out to us if you're interested in collaborating. We are very open, and we do believe that in order to achieve this grand vision, we all need to work together in building the absolute best learning tools for educators and students. So we are always very open to collaboration in any way we can. I also would like to dive a little more into some of the scientific research that we've done. If you have not seen my TED.com talk yet, you may check it out, but I do mention this research briefly in there. Luckily, I have a little more time with you here, and also, of course, ask questions if you have any. The brief story is that we did a study, or researchers, psychology researchers did a study where they had almost 200 students go through an experiment where the student had the same amount of time to perform or to participate in a normal classroom lecture, and the other group, group of the students, then had the same amount of time, but they only used the laboratory simulations that Labster had created. And we saw then, after doing a pre and post test, that the increase in learning outcomes was 76% compared to the traditional teaching method. And it really goes to show the potential in using these innovative learning simulations to complement the existing teaching, such that the teachers and educators can really focus on understanding where are the students' biggest needs. Because what happens after the students go through these simulations is that we provide the teachers and the educators with a full dashboard overview of how the students performed in the simulations, and you can, for instance, then dive in and really see, okay, this specific topic, let's say DNA or polymerase, was one of the most difficult topics for my students to understand, and therefore I know that I need to focus my follow-up lecture on those specific concepts and topics to ensure that improve that. And we're doing increasingly a lot of work on the teacher dashboard, also something we call the quality dashboard, to understand how students are learning. And it's also, feel free to ask more if you're curious. It's something we'll be sharing a lot more about also in the coming months. And we also hope to open up with a lot of the data that we have around how students are learning and how we can continue to increase the quality of these simulations to improve the learning. Another exciting study that's more recent from last year is performed by Guido Makransky, a very skilled psychology researcher that we've been collaborating with now for many years here at Labster. And what the study showed very interestingly, that the students who were not performing well So the lower performing students in the classroom were able to catch up much faster with the rest of the classroom, the rest of the students in the classroom. And the reason for this is that we see that the students who are not performing well are, first of all, much more engaged in the learning, but they can also, more importantly, go at their own pace. Whereas if you have a classroom lecture, it's incredibly hard to keep a pace where everyone can follow all the time. So we really believe that learning simulations like the ones that we create here at Labster is a great way for ensuring that everyone in the classroom are able to catch up and stay engaged in the studies. And that in turn, of course, also helps decrease the dropout rate significantly. And we're doing interesting studies now on that to have more validated data showing that there's a decrease in dropout rates. Also, interestingly, we see that using Labster is increasing the efficacy of the students. So they believe a lot more in themselves after they've created or run through these experiments. And that's incredibly important for learning as well and the engagement in the studies. So that's another exciting outcome. And if any of you are interested or have any more detailed questions, I should say this as well, by the way, please do reach out to us. Either ask in the chat or send an email to marian@labster.com. So Marian here is also at the call here today, but you can ask her also any questions and we can follow up and send this research to you so that you can dive more into it if you're curious to read more. I should mention that the previous study I just showed here was published in Nature Biotechnology and peer-reviewed. So we really ensure that the data that we share with you is of the highest quality. Yes, this one I cover. Maybe we've covered a bit already, but I think it's we have so many great testimonials and studies from or insights from our collaborators from around the world on our website as well. I encourage you to check out the testimonials section where we have a lot of great researchers and professors and teachers who have shared their insights and their feedback from using the Labster simulation. And that's always very exciting for us to see, and it's really something that drives us as a team, as an organization, when we can see and hear from our collaborators how amazed they are with the quality of the simulations, and also to hear especially how engaged the students are in using these simulations. So please also, if you are already an educator using Labster, please do keep sharing those with us as well. We'd love to hear your stories, and we always share them internally as well. So here we also have another case story. I see I'm going a bit ahead of time here, so I'm gonna maybe skip this one just for now. But so maybe diving back a little bit, what is it that makes Labster unique, and why is it that the Labster simulations are so effective? What are the sort of the secret sauce, if you may say so? Well, one of the things that I talked a little bit about earlier also is the fact that Labster is in creating a very high level of engagement and motivation for the students. And it's often really attributed to the real world cases that we're always creating around the simulations. So the students are not just standing in a laboratory, in a virtual laboratory, they're actually given a mission, an important, meaningful mission before they enter the laboratory, such that they understand that all the concept that they're learning, even if it's a small, very specific, narrow concept, has a very important meaning in the broader world and in solving global challenges. And we have now more than 50 simulations with so many different exciting missions and sort of journeys that the students can go on now. And I invite you to go to our lab catalog that I'll show you in a few minutes to explore and see more about those. Then another key thing about Labster is obviously that we give access to this very high quality equipment that's available there. And here's just some examples also of that, where we can, for instance, allow the students to experiment many times over and over again with really complex, expensive equipment that in many schools and universities around the world has very limited access, where the students may only get to use a machine a few times during their semester. There's even schools around the world that do not even have access to an actual laboratory. And in those cases, obviously, Labster also provides a huge advantage for the students to be able to use it virtually. But really, we do see Labster as a way to allow the students to experiment and test out equipment before they go into the real laboratory, so that they can really maximize the output and the outcome of the time they spent in the real laboratories. Then lastly, we have engaging 3D animations, and that's something you can't even do in the real laboratory, which we're actually very excited about. The fact that you could take any machine, and you can allow the students to really fly into it, zoom into it, and see on a molecular level what is happening, and allow the students to explore that and really navigate all the details of the molecules inside the machines as they go through the processes of the machines. That's something that we get a lot of very positive feedback from the students about, and really helps them understand the topics as well. Now, there's a lot more beyond this. One other very important topic to mention is the quiz questions that we have integrated throughout Labster. So the fact that, for instance, if a student is performing experiments, they're constantly being asked to ensure that they understand the concepts. And in the beginning, we were quite worried about this. The students might get a bit annoyed by all the quiz questions popping up. But in fact, it turns out the students love it. They are really excited about being mentally challenged and show that they understand the topics before they move on. So rather than just going through a protocol without fully understanding each concept on the task list, here we really make sure that they understand everything before they move on to the next topic. Now, I invite you to, again, watch our catalog and see the different simulations, because there's a lot more different concepts, and each simulation is quite unique as well. So you'll get to see the videos for the different simulations that talk more about it. Now, one I'd like to highlight here is the fermentation lab. So I already loaded it up here to prepare. And the fermentation lab you can find the catalog up here at our website. So you simply, let me just open it here as well so you see that. So the catalog has a full overview of the many simulations. I should also mention that we're producing more than 15 different simulations every single quarter now. So we have 5 new simulations coming out every month. So do keep an eye out for that. We also encourage you to request specific simulations. So if there is a simulation you do not see yet on the list, please do ask us. We also help work or partner with universities in many cases to create simulations if we see that it's already on our roadmap, especially to cover biology, chemistry, physics, medicine, general sciences, engineering, and so forth. So we're very excited to hear from you as well, which simulations you would like to see. Now, this is a fermentation lab, and you can read more about the labs on each of them, and you can see the learning objectives, you can see which techniques are being taught, and you also see a few screenshots from it, as well as the collaborating professors and also the universities that we work together with to create the specific simulation. In this case, I'll share a brief video so you get to see also some examples of the videos. Let me just mute it here.
Make a pilot-scale experiment and develop a process for efficient
there we go. So the fermentation lab teaches a bioethanol production, for instance, and the students start out by seeing a real scenario, so they get to see the actual production facilities and how it's all working. Let me actually do it here so I can jump a little bit. So there we go. And then after seeing the factories, they go into the real laboratories. And here's another example where they, as they're working in the laboratories, they see the virtual simulations. And then they also get to, they are challenged with quiz questions to ensure that they fully understand the different topics that they're covering in the simulations. And here's also an example of the very complex simulations that we can perform. Here the students can set up the machines just like they would like to have it, and then they can run the experiments that can take several days, for instance, and see the results instantly based on the settings that they have created on that machine. And this really allows the students to experiment and get different types of results, and then based on those results make the conclusions towards the end and see whether they have fully understood and mastered the concepts. So this is a very important part for us as well, to ensure that the students are allowed to experiment and do sort of a free-form, inquiry-based type of learning. And we're working now also increasingly with many researchers and researchers on something called, for instance, productive failure, where we actually design sometimes the simulations such that it encourages failure, because we do believe that failing is often one of the best ways to learn, because it really forces the students to reflect on what they did wrong and what they could do better in that specific simulation. So I hope that gives you a good insight into one example of how these simulations can work. Again, as I said earlier, each simulation is very different. So I do invite you to go in and look at the catalog. And if you see anything missing, please do drop us an email, marian@labster.com, and we'll be happy to also share more about that. This is an overview of all the different topics that we are really focused on right now at covering. We are even looking at other interesting areas of topics to dive into, but these are the main areas that we're looking at and aiming for more than 260 different, very high quality simulations. And again, looking always for partners to work together with us to create these simulations. Now, maybe looking a little bit beyond the simulations and also a little bit into the future and what's coming up in the future. So one of the things that we are very excited about is also working with partners where we can create very real life type scenarios. So one example could be the Hadron Collider at CERN, where we could suddenly allow the students to go to the real facilities virtually. Not only on the computer, but even also in VR if that's what they would like. And then they can, they can again zoom in, fly into the Hadron Collider, for instance, and really understand and see what it's like to be a molecule or an atom inside that machine and experiment with that and see the different reactions. And try out different experiments. So those are some of the types of simulations that we're also very excited about. You may also want to send the students to Mars, for instance, and then they could actually go there and do experiments as if they're really there. So we have different simulations now that are operating at Mars. And you can imagine how excited the students are about being able to do these types of learning experiments. And then one of the, I actually have right here, you can't see me right now, but I have one of the Daydream VR headsets. So we're working now closely together with Google to create virtual reality simulations, and also working with Samsung and Facebook to bring these virtual learning simulations to VR. So that means that many of the simulations that you see in our catalog will be available in virtual reality. And it really adds that extra dimension of immersion for the students. And it feels much more, for the students, it really feels like they're in the physical laboratory to a much larger degree. And we're really excited to see and already early research showing the higher levels of engagement that the students are creating. We're literally now doing brain scans using EEG brain scanning to understand how the students' brains are being affected by virtual reality and how it is increasing their cognitive capacity so that they may learn faster. Now, it's still early for us to say the actual outputs or impacts of this, but it's so far looking very, very promising. So we're increasingly now providing and making our simulations available in VR. So if you're interested in VR, also please do reach out to us. We're very interested in that. I should emphasize that our simulations work perfectly fine in web browsers as well. And nearly, or most of our partners use the Labster simulations in the browser. No plugins are required, so it's very easy and convenient for the students and teachers to use together with their LMS system, for instance. So this is a screenshot or a picture from the TED talk that I gave. I mentioned it earlier. If you haven't, do go check that one out. I also demonstrate the virtual reality simulations that we have. So it would be a good way for you to get a sense of that as well, in case you are curious to know more. If we look a little bit further into the future, some of the great feedback that we receive from our partners and teachers and collaborators is the need for haptic feedback. So for instance, if you're pipetting, it's important to also be able to feel the pipetting. It's a smaller part of the education, but there are these sort of edge scenarios where you would like to have haptic feedback. So we're actually working now with different companies to provide haptic feedback so that the students can feel what it's like to perform the different experiments. I would like to emphasize, though, that our research so far shows that the students can still learn the majority or nearly everything in the virtual simulations without the haptic feedback, so that you still have a really great tool already to prepare the students for the physical labs before they go into it. Another interesting feature is the sort of multiplayer feature where teachers are able to teleport into the simulations and really help the students live. So you can even start to remotely help students. You may instruct your students to perform one of the simulations as a home assignment, but then tell them that you will be available for teleportation during specific opening hours, teleportation hours, and then you can live help out the students inside the laboratory as well. So that's another exciting part. One other topic that I'd like to mention here is how data-driven we are in Labster, and we're very analytical in our approach. So we look a lot at how the students are learning and understanding when the students are learning. And what we do is we sort of create a heat map for all the simulations to really understand where are the students most excited, where are they learning the fastest, and where may they be getting stuck once in a while. And then as we go through and use the simulations, we continuously optimize and improve those simulations to ensure the maximum learning outcomes for the students. This is another example of adaptive research that we are also working on, where the students are able or where the computers are able to use the webcam to detect the facial expressions of the students and see whether they're getting, if they're happy when they get the questions correct, or whether they're getting bored or disengaged. And in those cases, we can actually adapt the difficulty of the simulations to make sure we always keep the students in a flow state and really make sure that they learn and are continuously engaged in the studies. Then even sort of, you could imagine, longer term, we really hope to create this in partnership with universities and schools, high schools around the world, to create an online virtual campus where the students can go in and they can access many different types of buildings in this online campus, so that they can experiment and try all the different new concept that they've mastered in real world scenarios or in buildings around this virtual campus. So this is a broader vision that we're working on, and of course we might even do a whole webinar just on that. It's a very ambitious project as well. So that is what we had today. I hope this was exciting for you, and also that you got some good insights into what Labster is doing. Again, I invite you really to check out our website. Do check out the testimonials section, and check out especially the lab catalog. You will find a lot of really great insights there. Also, do go in the Try Labster. You'll be able to try one of our simulations right away, and then get a feel for it. It's called the Lab Safety Simulation. And if you are interested further to try more simulations, do reach out to us again, Marian at labster.com, and we can provide you with access to all the many different simulations that you can get to try them out and see how they fit into your catalog. Your teaching semester. Lastly, I would like to emphasize that using Labster is incredibly easy. We've ensured that it is no hassle for teachers to start to use Labster. What you do when you get Labster, you get what we call an LTI link. And this is a link that you can copy into your existing school LMS system. So for instance, Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, and so forth. So that means you don't have to change anything. It is essentially the same as maybe integrating a YouTube video into your LMS system, asking the students to watch that. But here you can just ask them to play one of our simulations, and then you can integrate it into your existing education there. All right, so that's that. Now I would like to hand it over to questions. So I'm going to quickly turn back here to the webcam so that you get to see me here again. There we go. All right, great. So I have Marian has been also monitoring questions coming in via the email and the chat and via Google Hangout. So I have some of the questions here, and I'll go through them. Please do ask if you have any other questions at all. Please do ask. So here, first question is: our sales and marketing team are the primary point of contact for collaborations, and they can help you reach our account representative. Oh, sorry. Sorry, that was actually, oh yeah, super. So I get the question here. So this is a question from Bonnie from Ogden, Utah. So what is the best way to reach out and participate in collaboration? Okay, yes, and Marian provided some information here again. I think at this point, do reach out to Marian at labster.com. Also, Marian is in the chat. Then we'll coordinate with you. It depends a lot on which department or type of research that you like to do and which type of simulations you like to work with us in. And then we'll connect you with the right team here at Labster so that we can work together on creating new great simulations. Now, we do many types of collaborations, so I also encourage you to suggest any type of research project you might already be doing, and you may want to research jointly together with us. We also have several research grants where we collaborate with universities and high schools to continuously innovate on these learning simulations. So I hope that gave you enough information. There is also a contact form on our website that you can also use. So I think that's good. So maybe as we see here, so I see I've gone quite a lot over time with the presentation. That's what happened when you get really excited about it all. But we'll take maybe one more question, and then I want to make sure also here that you know that you have full access to us as a team at any time. These webinars is a series of new webinars that we'll be creating, and we'll also be bringing up on more different experts in different fields to the webinars, so that you can ask questions around that. So we'll be sharing a lot more information about that. If you have not already, do sign up for our webinar newsletter. So if you go to labster.com/webinars, that's where you can sign up for the webinars newsletter. And then we will share a lot more information. Also, we'll share a summary of this webinar, and we'll take, of course, any other follow-up questions that you might have and share them with all of you as well. So let me just check here that I also covered all the points here on our list. Yes, it looks very good. So that's very good. So second question, I'll take maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we have to wrap it up. So second question came in from Frank, Ottawa in CA. So the question, or first question, so there's 2 questions here. First question, can an individual student buy a virtual lab independently from an academic institution? So currently we always try our best to work, or we always work actually together with our institutions. So currently students cannot buy them individually. Now we are actually looking at ways to open up for that, because we realize that in many cases there's a longer cycle for teachers and especially the institutions to decide to adopt Labster. So we will actually soon be introducing a direct-to-student option. So we may, and we'll see how that is responding. So that's something that we've are actually currently now looking into based on feedback from the students. We do have some simulations that are for free, so free to access for students. So for instance, now I can show you the DataDriven headset. So actually I should demonstrate this. So the DataDriven headset is a very good example where the students can use their existing mobile phone, and then they just slide the phone into the headset and they plug it in. And then using this hand controller, they can actually now start to interact with the objects as if it was a real laboratory. So this is something they're really excited about, and working very closely with several universities and Google to bring out to many students. And we already today have a free simulation available on this. It's called the Lab Safety simulation. So it's about general lab safety and learning all the core concepts for the students before they enter the lab. And similarly on the Gear VR app, or the Gear VR store, so a different VR headset, we also have a free simulations around the crime scene investigation. It's a slightly simplified version of our online crime scene lab, which you can see in our catalog, because it also, that one is targeted more for the broader audience. So I hope that answers your question. And if you have any feedback on that, what you suggest we should do, please do share that with us. We'd love to hear it. Here from Frank is, have you done any sort of study to see whether Labster's product improve the retention rate of the students? Yes, and by retention rate, I assume also decreasing the dropout rates. So we are actually currently doing studies on that. So we are really closely monitoring. We have received positive feedback from the teachers from around the world, really globally, saying that the students are much more engaged. We're now currently doing a sort of more scientific approach to that, measuring the differences in retention rates, and so far it's very promising. We are a very scientific organization, so I'm afraid to share any sort of any data prematurely, but I can say that there's a very high likelihood that Labster will be helping universities, high schools around the world to significantly decrease the dropout rates. We're very excited about the results coming out of the research being done there. So that's very good. All right, great. So we aim sort of to hit the 40-minute mark here for this first webinar, which is right on time now. So I'm very excited to have kicked off our series of webinars here as well. We'll continue to improve the webinars, and so please do share any feedback that you have with us on how we can create great content for you. We would like to bring in many different people from our team, for instance, if it's researchers, teachers. If you want to meet some of our content experts, please do share with us, and we'll invite them to the webinar and maybe have even open Q&A discussions with them, so that you can ask questions and we'll have a great dialogue on how we build the simulations here at Labster, and how you can participate in the creation of this next generation of learning content to engage with students worldwide. So I want to send out a quick thanks for everyone who joined, and also a big thanks to Shago and Marian, who have been organizing and setting up this entire webinar series, and actually the entire series of webinars. Please do share with everyone. Also share labster.com/webinars, so we can have more signups for our future webinars. And then I look forward to seeing you again in the future. So thanks so much everyone for joining, and have an amazing day. See you guys. Bye.